We're back, Alphas.
We're coming in hot with inspiring guests, witty banter, and colorful commentary for today's veterans and military community. This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Hi there, Alphas. During the holiday season, the Tango Alpha Lima podcast team is taking a break. Woo! Need a break. But while we're gone, we do have a little bonus content for you.
So we've looked back at all the things we've done during season 6, and we've come up with a list of our top 6 most impactful guests from 2025. And that was not easy. It really was difficult.
There were so many great guests. But we'll be re-releasing those interviews this week. So if you haven't already subscribed to Tango Alpha Lima on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts, don't miss our countdown. We've got you covered.
Okay, believe it or not, it's been almost a year since we interviewed retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Lee Ellis, a fighter pilot during the Vietnam War who was shot down, captured, and held captive as a POW for 5.5 years at the infamous Hanoi Hilton. He shared his incredible story of survival, about his work with Leadership Freedom, LLC, as a nationally recognized leadership trainer, coach, author, and keynote speaker. And I'll tell you what, this indeed was one of the most memorable episodes. The insights, the authenticity, the vulnerability that he shared and what he experienced was pretty unparalleled with kind of what we've experienced on this podcast. So, Joe, what do you remember about this one?
For me, I think sometimes you get this little tunnel vision of feeling like you've been through some things, and then you hear the story of somebody who's been through something that you can't even begin to imagine. And not that I'm a big complainer or anything, but it is a reminder that, asking for help is one thing, but just sitting around whining, I think I'm good. I think I'll just I'll let other people do that, because there's men like this floating around that have been through some real things and don't complain about it at all. They share their story in such a beautiful and heartfelt way. It was a really humbling, wonderful interview with some great insights.
Stacy, probably nobody more ready to be a leadership trainer than this guy.
Right? No, I mean, like I was just gonna say, I don't care how much time has passed from that experience that he spent back in Vietnam. Those are the kind that leave indelible marks and will change you for life. And some very powerful life lessons learned the hard way, which we can all have takeaways from. And his attitude is so incredibly remarkable, and I always want to aspire to be that way in my own life. So yeah, he's an incredible person, a human being. His story is phenomenal, and obviously has great, as my friend Tommy Clack says, great intestinal fortitude. So you definitely want to tune into this episode.
I mean, it really is. It's living history, and the fact that we get insights like this from these type of experiences. We won't, for generations past didn't have access to stuff like this. So just the ability to document for posterity, it's really remarkable. So I'll tell you what, stick around, Alphas, after the break, and we'll be back with our interview with Colonel Lee Ellis from episode 246. You don't want to miss this one.
Honoring those who came before us. The American Legion pays perpetual respect for all past military sacrifices to ensure they are never forgotten by new generations. We are veterans strengthened in America. We are the American Legion.
Today we're joined by retired Air Force Colonel Lee Ellis, whose full name is actually Leon, which happens to be the name of one of my favorite literary characters. Just saying. Anyway, you go by Lee. Welcome to the show, Tango Alpha Lima podcast, Lee. We are honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, Colonel Ellis, it's an absolute honor to have you here. As an Army aviator myself, who went through CRC school at Fort Rucker, now Fort Novosel, and so for those not familiar, that's Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School. I learned firsthand how the lessons of Vietnam shaped the survival training that we received there. Those lessons are rooted in the experience of heroes like you that endured unimaginable hardships. So it's deeply personal for me today. Sorry to get to speak with you because of your resilience, because of your leadership that inspired generations of service members, including myself. I remember being back there in flight school and watching some of the videos from you and your generation, to be able to take the lessons learned that you guys went through with your blood sacrifice, to be able to instill that into us and how we should go forward. So your time at the Hanoi Hilton is a testament to the power of resilience and leadership under the most extreme conditions that a human being could be exposed to. So with that being said, would you briefly, I think it would be great to share whatever you feel compelled to about the circumstances that led to your capture, and how you've been able to take those experiences as a POW to use to shape your understanding of leadership, of how you translate those lessons for people facing very difficult kinds of challenges today.
I just turned 24 years old in 1967. I was on my 53rd mission over North Vietnam, flying mostly patrolling up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and a few missions over into Laos, and a few in close air support for the Army and Marine Corps and I Corps down in northern part of South Vietnam. So I've flown different kinds of missions, but we were flying to bomb out the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to prevent them bringing down guns and ammo and soldiers to fight in the South, because they were not supposed to be down there according to the agreement of 1954 that the Communist Party in the North Vietnam had signed. So on my 53rd mission, my airplane, we were getting shot at a lot, almost every mission. We'd had airplanes hit before, and usually when they got hit, a bullet hole would go through the wing or something. And if you got hit by anti-aircraft artillery, 37 or 57 millimeter, it would blow a hole in your tank and maybe the engine, and you'd usually make it back, at least where you could jump out and be rescued if it really fell apart. But this day, the 7th of November, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon of 1967, my airplane blew up into several pieces, and the cockpit was just one of those pieces, and it was tumbling. And in the F-4, there are two pilots. The Air Force had two pilots. The Navy and Marine Corps had a pilot and a RIO, a radar intercept officer, in the back seat. But we were flying, and half my class from pilot training in 67A, which graduated in August 66, half of us across 8 bases, there were 534 of us in that class, and over half of us got an assignment that said F-4 Phantom Pipeline Southeast Asia. So we went to combat training right after we went to SEER school, and then we went to combat training, and quick as we got qualified, we went to Vietnam or to Thailand, to Ubon, Thailand, or to one of the bases in South Vietnam. So I was on my 53rd mission. I'd flown a good bit. I was flying with the wing commander and the DO and the squadron commander and a lot of guys. And new guys, I was training new guys that came into the combat zone on how we did it over there. And so that day, when that airplane blew up, I was focused on ejecting, and when it flipped, there was negative G's and my head was up against the cockpit, and then it flipped again and it was positive G's, and I didn't want to eject with my head against the top of the canopy, and so, because I knew it'd probably break my neck, and so it flipped and positive G's, and I pulled that handle, and so did my front seater, Captain Ken Fisher, who was 88 yesterday, and we jumped out, and he was about a half a mile away from me, so I didn't focus on him. I just saw his parachute coming down. But I was planning to, I did my parachute landing fall. I hit all 5 points, just like you're trained to do, and jumped down in an old bomb crater there, and pulled out my radio, emergency radio, and I said, hey, I'm 200 meters north of, I told him to my wingman or my flight lead, I said, I'm 200 meters north of the river, start strafing. I'm headed at 300, I'm headed south to the river because we're only about a mile from the Tonkin Gulf. Well, they surrounded me and captured me quickly, and it took 2 weeks to get to Hanoi. And that's so many stories there. But what happened was I had a really good soldier who was in charge of taking me north. He was a good man. Now, he worked for the communists because he had no choice, but he was a good soldier, and he would not let them beat me up. He wouldn't let them punish me. He wouldn't let them attack me because a lot of people were trying. You know, we'd bombing up there, and the Communist Party would get out there with a bullhorn in the village and start getting them all fired up, and they'd try to come after me. And he had his soldiers protect me. And so I got to Hanoi and joined up with Captain Fisher again and two other guys, and we went into a 6.5 foot, 7 foot cell that was totally isolated in that there was no cell wall, there was no nobody on the other side of that wall. It was an empty walkway about that wide, about 2 feet wide, so that it was built that way so that we could be maximum security. We couldn't tap on the wall to anybody else. And that was for the next 8.5 months. And then I moved to Sante for a couple of years, and that's where the Raiders raided, the Sante Raiders raided in November 70, but we had already moved out. But those first few months were really hard, and we were all tortured, and they wanted to get either some kind of information, and they wanted to break us so that we would collaborate with them and do what they told us to do and not try to communicate with our peers and partners there. And of course it was us against them, and they wanted us to provide anti-war information and propaganda for them and to obey them. And we were fighting very hard not to do that, and so we got tortured. Everybody got tortured, and 95% of us did. But we bounced back, and Captain Fisher lasted longer than I did in the torture, and the other guy in the cell who was being tortured at the same time I was, he didn't last as long as I did. But when I was, we had the code of conduct, and that said you won't collaborate, you won't give any information to the enemy. And so when I finally gave in that day and filled out a 3-page biography, I cried like a baby because I was so ashamed, so sad that I could not beat them and live up to my commitment to the code of conduct. And I get back to my cell, and there's one guy already back, and then Captain Fisher came back a few hours later, and we decided that, well, we did our best. And then when we got contact with the other cells later, a few months later, we learned that everybody had been tortured to do that, same thing, and a lot of people had been tortured for other things, but you had to bounce back. You had to believe in yourself and your teammates, and you suffered and you were sad, but they'd been through that too, and some lasted longer than others. Some guys are tougher than others, and so we just we learned to live with that, and day by day, and that's where we were. That's the early years. Wow. But we had great leadership as we got connected out at Sante. We had great leadership, and our leaders had been there longer. Generally, the senior leaders were guys that had been there 2 years longer than I had. They got captured in 1965, and I didn't get captured till November 67. So they had been through a whole lot of torture and been in solitary confinement a lot of times, but they just bounced back every time. And that was a great example for us. You're going to suffer, but you got to stay positive and come through it. That's a long answer to your question, but I'll try to answer the next one shorter.
It was absolutely perfect, and we wanted to give you the opportunity to share as much as you felt. So thank you.
And honestly, if anybody's gonna talk for a few minutes here, they've heard enough of us. I think they'd love to hear from you, and so it means so much that you're here. As somebody who partially makes a living telling awful stories about themselves, I know that it takes a little bit out of you. And it's not always easy. I was a corpsman with 2-1 Marines in Fallujah. I went through some small trials myself, and I had to work really hard to find purpose. And so I'd love to ask you, and if you need to do context and go into a little bit more of what you went through, that's obviously perfectly fine. But I would love to hear some of the lessons that you learned. I mean, it sounds like you've already spoke on one, is that you've got to sort of forgive yourself for being human and move on,
Yeah.
and not hold yourself accountable, because it's easy to look back as in my case, a 43-year-old man, and go, if I could have done these things right here and it would have made my life better, I could have done this or that. And that's not fair to that 20-year-old kid that was going through that.
Yeah.
That kid did his best. And so I'd love to hear some lessons from that time that I think might be applicable to other people that have been through struggles and trials themselves.
The thing that really helped us the most was the communications in a community that were struggling the way we were. In other words, if we'd been locked up with a guy who had never been to the war and hadn't been through torture, that'd be a whole different game, because she would not know what it was like to go through that. But when you've been locked up with people that have gone through worse torture and worse times and been there longer than you have, you really can't complain much. And they're smiling and trying to outsmart the enemy. You start to realize that, well, they survived it and they're smiling, and that guy's married and has 2 kids. I'm single, and he's been here 2 years or 3 years. It just makes a lot of difference. I think that's why it's so important, and that's one of the things the American Legion does. When I was growing up, I don't think we had American Legion in the little town I was in, but we had a VFW. And those guys would go there, World War II guys and Korean guys, they'd go there 2 or 3 times a week after work, and it was totally dry county, so there was no alcohol sold. But in the VFW, they could sell beer and whiskey, especially beer, I know, and guys would go over there and have a beer and with their buddies and talk to them, and then they'd go home. And so that connection, I think, was very important for them. And toward the end, here's another thing that most people don't know, is that in 1968, a few of the wives started putting pressure on our government. The Johnson administration the Secretary of Defense and the advisors in there had told them not to put pressure on the communists about our treatment, because they were this and that and the other negotiating or whatever. And so when in 1968, they had told the wives and families to keep quiet, not to talk about POW treatment and all that kind of stuff and what was happening. And a lot of them were MIAs, missing in action. So they rebelled and started to speak up and get into the public venture. And then when the Nixon administration came in 1969, and Secretary Laird was the Secretary of Defense, they agreed with the wives to put pressure on them, and they started putting pressure on the communists about following the Geneva Conventions that they had signed, that they would be treated, we would be treated with lenient and humane treatment. And so that pressure all began to build in early 69, and then in the summer of 1969, there was an escape at the zoo camp, which is on the other side of town from the Hanoi Hilton. And when that escaped, they just started torturing people. Now, remember, they're getting pressured from back in the U.S. from the wives and families. It's building up. And Ross Perot and people like that were paying for these wives to fly around the country several of my friends' wives got together and flew to different countries, 10 or 12 countries, to put pressure on them. These were more middle of the road countries that had more contact with the communists in North Vietnam. They put pressure on them to tell the communists in North Vietnam, the leaders there, to quit torturing us because they had signed the Geneva Convention. Well, when Ho Chi Minh died in September of 1969, and about 3 weeks later, in the first week of October, the Communist Party leaders in North Vietnam called in all the camp commanders and told them basically to stop the torture and to treat us differently. And so that really made a big difference. And what these wives and families did back home changed our treatment. The torture stopped. Then, a year later, in November of 70, the Green Berets, the Special Forces, came and raided a camp in November 70, November the 21st, the night, it was 22nd, in the morning of the 22nd. They raided the camp that I'd lived in for 2 years, and we had moved out because they had taken some old barracks and made a showplace camp, and we had been moved there in July, and they weren't sure about that, so they raided the camp, and we weren't there, but they executed it perfectly. And we're still connected. We're connected with the Sante Raiders, the POWs are. But within
so they weren't able to get anyone out there?
No, they couldn't get any. There was none of us there. And not any of them. The only one that was injured was one of the guys that had to crash the helicopter inside the compound, and one of the guys broke his ankle when they crashed in, but none of them got hurt, and they executed it perfectly. But within 48 hours, we all moved back to the Hanoi Hilton, and they put us in big cells. 40, most of us, all of us except a few of the senior leaders were in cells that were about 1,800 to 2,000 square feet, and we had 40 to 60 guys in those cells. So it's an open bay cell, barracks with 40 to 60 guys. And so I had 55 guys in my cell, about 1,800 square feet for the next 2 years. And so we got healthier and healthier every day. We had time to get emotionally and mentally healthy, and we had time to get educated, because we had classes 5 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday classes, 6 days, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. You could study Spanish, French, German, Russian, geography, design and graphics, and music, whatever you wanted. You could learn to play chess. We got so involved that, I got speaking fluent French and fluent Spanish. I'd had French in college, and a 2,000 word vocabulary in German, because we were working on it every day. But we had no books, but there was some guy in that cell, or usually a couple or three, that knew a lot about something. So we just worked together, and we got healthy. That's why we have a lower PTSD rate than the combat veterans from the South who were there a year. And we're outliving our peers. Our average age now is 88. Wow. I'm 81. I'm the youngest, one of the two youngest guys that were there 5 years or more. And our marriages have been great, and I've just written a new book about POW romance, Captured by Love. It just came out a couple of years ago.
I'm glad you brought that up, because during my research, I came across your publishing company, Freedom Star Media, and found those books, Captured by Love, and then 2 other books, Engaged with Honor, and then Leading with Honor: Leadership Lessons from the Hanoi Hilton. Yep. Thank you. Let's see the front of that one.
Leading with Honor.
There we go. And for those of you who are not seeing the YouTube version, he was showing us the covers of those books. But you can find the covers of those books and the books. You can buy those books online at freedomstarmedia.com, or wherever you get your other books, maybe your local bookstore. You can order them there as well.
They're all on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, all those places. Yeah. And
Valentine's Day is just around the corner. You love birds, so get out there and get the Captured by Love book for your
That's
warm and cuddly.
20 stories of guys who were POWs 5 to 8 years. There's 2 guys that were there almost 6 years, or more than 5 years. I'm sorry, more than 8. One guy more than 8 years, and 2 guys 8 years. And most of them that were married stayed married, and they've been married over 60 years. And the ones that were married and their wives divorced them when they came home, they met somebody within a year, and now they've been married 50 years. And the guys like me that were single, I was the last single guy, I think, to get married. And I didn't get married till a little over almost a year and a half after I got home. And my wife and I will be married 50 years in next week.
Oh, that's nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So we've had great relationships, and we've been very healthy, and we just got healthy before we came home. It was a real blessing. That raid by the Sante Raiders put us back into a big camp in those big cells where we really got in community every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For the book Engage with Honor, particularly, you have that book kind of broken down by chapters that offers readers guidance on the approach to living honorably and accountability in your life. Can you break that down for me, the approach of this book and how people might kind of apply it?
We have a model. I'm a graphic person. I don't do graphics, but I'm a visual person. So we built a model. And that courageous accountability model is on our website. You can download it for free. But that is character, courage, and the commitment are the 3 in the middle of it, okay? Character, courage, and commitment. You have to have courage to have good character and maintain your commitments, okay? And then on the right side, it goes down. That takes you up to the top, and it says clarify, connect, collaborate, and close out. And in fact, last year, I did a blog every month on that model, that visual model, about character, courage, and commitment, and then clarify, collaborate. I did 2 months on collaborate and close out. And then today I did one, and I talked about, again, clarifying and connecting and collaborating and having good discussions in a meeting. So we use that model a lot, and that is a kind of it's more day-to-day practical. And Leading with Honor book has 6 chapters, 6 lessons leading yourself, and 8 lessons, 8 chapters leading others. So those are overall leadership guidelines in Leading with Honor. But Engage with Honor, it's called, the subtitle is Building a Culture of Courageous Accountability. And you really have to believe in yourself. You have to be confident, but you have to be humble and vulnerable. And a lot of leaders are not confident enough in themselves to be humble and vulnerable. But great leaders do, because they'll look at you and they'll listen to you and say, you know what, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea. That takes confidence and humility. And when you mess up, you say, guys, I should have listened to you. I messed up on that one. And a confident leader can do that, but when you're insecure, you can't do that. Well, in the POW camps, we got very secure. When you suffered for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you come out of there very secure. Like, what's going to happen to me today that's worse than over there? So you don't worry about stuff. You're not insecure. And that's one reason we've been so happy, is that we got healthy enough to admit when we mess up. Most of us all do. There's a couple that won't, but most of us do. And listen to other people. When you're a leader and you listen to your people, they feel more valuable. They feel more important. You don't have to do what they say, but you might learn something, and you might want to do what they say. They say, you know what, that was a good idea. I'm going to go do it. And they feel important. They're going to work harder. They're going to be more loyal, and they're going to be more confident in their performance. So you're helping them grow. If you think back about it, growing up, I had a very wonderful experience growing up. My parents were healthy and good, had a good life, but my friends, my teenage friends in high school, their parents believed in me and other young people, and they treated me like I was somebody, like a real person. Well, that really, looking back now, that helped me be more confident in myself and believing in myself in that period of suffering.
Oh, thank you for that, Colonel Ellis. I think I wanted you kind of a little bit of a fun question. But maybe before I lead into that, Senator McCain, when he was POW, I think I remember hearing when he got out that he said he just wanted to read, like wanted to consume books, read and read. Was that because he wasn't in community like you guys were? Was he in isolation? Do you know what his situation was?
Well, he was in isolation for a while, for a year or so in that early time, but in toward the end he was in with other people. Uh, but I think we all wanted to read. I was not a book reader. In fact, I wasn't a book reader much until I went to the Air War College and I started having to read, and I said, "This is really good."
Yeah,
Now I
it's
read books all the time. I
right.
just
Not
love
only
reading
read them
books.
but write them. It's funny what you appreciate once it's taken away and you no longer have it. Okay, so the funny play on this is if you could design your dream escape room, and I'm sure you probably wouldn't put those two together. Although I'm sure you probably dreamed of mini escapes. If you were going to put puzzles, challenges, themes inspired by your time in there, what would you have put in there? Would it have been the books? What was it, the thing that you guys were craving most other than your family from your time in there? And what if and when you fantasized and thought about the ways in which you broke out, was it to be able to return back to America to taste the foods that we always talk about when we're in the military and we're away and we don't have access to that? What was that like for you?
I think it was different things at different times because when you're 5 to 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
I spent 1 month deciding what kind of lawyer I was going to be and where I was going to go to law school. And I was getting information on what kind of lawyers there are and where to go to law school from guys around me secretly communicating through the walls. And I thought about that almost all day long every day. And then I spent 2 months thinking about farming because I grew up on a farm, and I thought, when I go back, I'm going to start out with about 60 acres and build it up, and I would farm for 8 or 10 hours a day, planning and calculating all that stuff that it was going to take. And by the end of 2 months, I owned almost the whole county because I didn't have to pay any taxes and I could set my own prices. So my wife, when we came back, and I met my wife about a year after I got back, and we got married a few months later. But we were transferred back to Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio. I wanted to buy a farm. And she didn't push back on me. She hadn't learned to get in my face and say, "Lee, that's not a good idea. And here's why, ABC." And I would have listened to her. So we're different. And I listen to somebody who's direct in my face, but if they mumble a little bit and talk about something, yeah, I don't listen. So she learned to get in my face, and that's been really good. But we lived on a farm for about a year, and then she was pregnant with her fourth child. She had two when we got married, and she'd had second one. She was pregnant with the second one. She said, "Lee, I'm getting depressed out here on this farm. I don't have anybody to talk to, and we need to move on base." And she said, "I said, man, yeah." She said, "We need to get in counseling." Now this is 1979, early 79. No pilot has ever been to counseling, but they had a counselor on the base, and I said, "Okay," because I'm fearless, let's go to counseling. And after the second meeting with the counselor, I said, "We need to move on base." And so we sold the farm and moved on base. Oh, it
Well,
was
that's
just,
great. That's great. That's great, Lee. And I really, but at the core of that, I think what I'm really hearing too is the power of the mind and the ability to, even
yeah,
when the physical things and the activities and the things that we can do, the actually having the material that you can put your focus and awareness on something. And
Yeah.
whether it's through, 8 months of, you got your Juris Doctorate. Okay, now it's on to let me become, the prize winner of, the at the county fair. And so, thank you for sharing that with us and
I
helping us
think
remember how powerful the mind is.
it's a good way to think things through before you jump into them.
Mm.
And when you don't have to jump into something, before you have to jump into it, before you have to make a decision. Because when we came home, the Air Force said, "You ready to go back to work?" And I said, "Flying?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Absolutely. I'm ready." And I went back and requalified for flying and became an instructor pilot right away. So, and just had great flying career. But when you have some time, it's a good time. It's a good time to think about things. We guys would play golf. They would stand up and learn how to swing their golf course, remember how to swing their golf club, and practice every day. And one guy who'd played on the academy, a Naval Academy golf team, when he came home, he got to play in the New Orleans Open a few months, like 2 or 3 months after we came home, 2 months after, maybe 6 weeks. And I think he shot three over par.
Wow.
He played in the Pro-Am, but
That's
wow,
remarkable.
because he had practiced almost every day the last 2 or 3 years there. Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I hear, and it seems like a lot of the people that we talk to that really have true resilience, it's not something that happens during the bad thing. It's something that happens when you're processing it. It's something that resilience is how you take that bad thing and you learn what to do with it. And so, and you mentioned talking about leadership and how a good leader can admit their mistakes and move on and listen to people who are around them that are smarter in the specific thing that they're trying to do. My wife avoids that entire thing by just always being right. But for people like me, I feel like there's got to be a pattern of poor leadership that you see doing as a leadership consultant. You've worked with all these different ranges of organizations, but there's got to be a pattern of what you see, because there's a certain type of people, and you can probably put this into better words than I can, that are great at getting in charge and don't know what to do with it when they get there. I mean, they rise to the top. They're the cream of the crop, and they just don't have the foundation to hold it all together, or something happens when they get there that becomes a barrier between them and the leader that they could be. I'm curious what your experience is as you've consulted with all these different people and the experiences that you had and learned, the hard way. How do you point that out to people that are reaching out to you to say, "Hey, we need help here"?
You have to, as I said at the very beginning, you have to learn to listen to people. You have to learn to value people. And when we have an assessment that shows you whether you're results oriented, mission focused, or relationship people focused. And you're naturally wired, 40% of the population is naturally wired for results mission. And 40% of the population is wired for people and relationships. But as a leader, you're going to have to learn to adapt to both. Now, you won't be as good as the other guy who's a fully results focused, and you won't be if you're results focused, you won't be as good as the relationship people are, but you can adapt enough that nobody will know. They won't notice it. Just a little bit of adapting. You listen to somebody. I coached the CEO, the president of a division of a Fortune 200 company back a few years ago, and he was a West Point graduate. He was had been an Army Ranger, and now he's working as a president of a division of a company. And he was a really good guy, but he never encouraged anybody. He didn't really listen to them much, and I sat down with him and I said, "You know what? You're a really good man. you're a great man, but you need to learn to adapt your behaviors to help people to feel valued, important, that you care about them, you listen to them. And he said, well, that's just not me. And I said, yes, you are a good man and you can adapt. And I'm going to show you how. And I said, last week, two weeks ago, we had a retreat. You had a retreat, and I was there working with your team over here on Lake Lanier Island at the one of the hotels there. And I said, the person in charge, I said, what was that retreat like? Was it a good retreat? He said, yeah, it was great. We accomplished all our goals. We had a good time, everything. I said, well, have you told the lady who's your VP in charge of that, have you told her? He said, no. I said, I want you to write out 2 sentences to tell her she did a great job. And he worked on it for 5 or 6 minutes, and we talked about it. And I said, okay, now he had a private bathroom in his office. I'm going to stand here. I want you to go in there and open the bathroom door and stand in front of the mirror, and I want you to say it to her. Practice saying it to her. I want you to go down the hall, pretend you went down the hall, walked in her office, and I want you to say it. And I watched him a time or two, and I said, you're not smiling. I want you to smile. And smile. He said, Joan, that retreat you organized and conducted for us last week, that was really successful. Thank you so much for what you did. That's all you got to do. And he did it. And he started encouraging and listening to his team, and they just all of a sudden changed. Well, about a month later, I finished up my coaching assignment with him. And he said, I was in his office. He said, now, can you stay about 5 minutes after today, our meeting? And I said, yeah. That's what he asked me when I first walked in. I said, sure. He said, I want you to meet someone. Well, when we finished, he jumps up, goes out, comes in with this lady. He introduces his wife. She said, I wanted to meet you and tell you thank you for what you've done, because we have only one child, 13-year-old son, and he is sitting down with him and talking to him and listening to him, and they just have a great relationship now.
Oh, that is so warming.
And, I saw this guy is now CEO of a company in Atlanta, and I told that story at a speaking to commissioning of UGA cadets. And a guy came up to me and said, I know who that is. And I said, well, I can't tell you who it is, but I know. He said, I know who it is. I bet I can tell you. And he named the guy. And I said, sounds like you got a good guy, but I didn't tell him it was the guy, but it was. And he said, he's the best CEO we've ever had. And I saw the guy, I'd seen the guy, my friend, a few months earlier. And I said, well, how you doing? He said, doing well. He said, how's your son? He said, we're going to run a half marathon together on Saturday. And then his son graduated from college, is working in a business here in Atlanta. He said, we're going to run a half marathon together on Saturday.
That's incredible. By the way, I'm over outside of Douglasville.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too far from you.
I know Douglasville is on the west side, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Southwest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Colonel Ellis, I love that story, and I think one of the things that you may not even recognize is there's certainly the leadership consulting and helping to coach somebody through that, but then there's also the really special thing of what you personally endured in that small community of those men that you were in that cell with, that can permeate and make a ripple unlike few others can, because of what you had to go through. So it may just carry a little bit more weight coming from someone like you. So the fact that you take the time, that you've made a continued career out of service, out of helping leaders to get better and to serve better, it's just a testament to you and the man that you are. It's been an absolute privilege and honor for you to come and spend some time with us today. Before you sign off, is there anything you want to share with our alphas that we didn't get a chance to discuss?
Do you asking me?
Yes, sir. Is there anything you want to share that we didn't get a chance to discuss?
I think being with a team who's gone through something that you've gone through really was helpful. That was so helpful to us. And our leaders had gone through more torture and more solitary confinement. Reisner, Denton, and Stockdale were their three senior leaders for the most of the time. And they were in solitary confinement. They were there 7.5 years. They had all spent more than 4 years in solitary confinement. Now, they had connections their time. But Reisner, for instance, was in solitary confinement in total darkness for 10 months. And that's when I first met him and started communicating with him secretly. But these guys, they just kept bouncing back. And they would, and when they had a cellmate, and one guy, Stockdale, had a Navy Lieutenant J.G. He was a group commander on a ship when he was shot down and captured in 65, and a guy was shot down in 67. Dan Glenn was his cellmate, and he told him, I'm going to put out some the back U.S. policy, a little bit more details of some things that we can put in to take one level down from the code of conduct about how to operate and how to behave. And so he went over it with Dan and listened to Dan's feedback, who was a Lieutenant J.G. And that was just a wonderful thing. Our leaders would listen to us and take into account what we had to say. And the leaders treated us, the junior guys, like we were somebody. And that was very important. We became more humble too, and more confident.
Awesome. Well, you certainly had some of the most remarkable leaders on the planet to learn from, and we consider you to be one as well, Colonel Ellis. We'll have your show handles and links, your social media handles, and links we've talked about in our show notes. And is there a website our alphas can go to learn more about your work?
Leadingwithhonor.com and POWromance.com to learn. There's a lot of stories on that, and you can download the first 2 stories of the book, but there's a lot of pictures and podcasts and things with people there there. But we also, I do a monthly blog, about a 700, 800 word blog on leadership every month. And like I said earlier, I've been talking about some of those models, the Courageous Accountability model last year. And this one, I talk about the Engage and Align model, where how to get a group together in your team and discuss things and listen to everybody before you make a decision. And then, because it's going to be so much more supported when you get them all together and talk about it and make that decision. So anyway, you can download the coaching video, 5 or 6 minute coaching video, and the blog, whichever one you want, every month. And a lot of those lessons, the leadership lessons that we learned in the POW camp, amazing how some of those are so similar to relations in good marriages and relationships. You got to be committed. You got to listen to the other person, and they're going to have different talents than you are. Joe, you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
You're going to have different talents than you are, and some important, treating people with respect, trusting people, and being trustworthy. All of those things are so important.
It means so much that you spent this time with us today, and so of course thank you so much for visiting. We look forward to seeing you do more amazing things and sharing your experiences. And so Alphas, please stick around. We've got some scuttlebutt after the break.
Welcome back, Alphas. We're keeping things short and sweet on the countdown, so there's no scuttlebutt today. But thanks for taking the trip down memory lane with us.
We really hope you guys enjoyed the episode. On behalf of the entire Tango Alpha Lima podcast team, we hope you're enjoying time with your loved ones during the holiday season.
If you miss us during the holidays, which I know you are, you can always subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us guest and mail recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. So long.
So long.